Class 13 is a locomotive that I've really wanted for a long time, and if a novice like me can do this, then you can too. I've been fascinated by the Class 13 ever since I was a child, and I remember seeing it featured in a magazine, and I just found them to be fascinating. Well, hello there! It is so great to see you, and I really do hope that you are well. I'm Jenny Kirk, welcome you up here to Weir Yard in my loft, and today we're going to be having ourselves a little bit of a project build. What if I'd said to you, Class 13, the Mega Gronk? You'd probably think, well, there's no ready-to-run model of that, and given that there were only ever 3 of these made, with very limited geographical sphere of operation at Tinsley Marshalling Yard, they're probably going to remain something that's really just for the realms of people prepared to put a little bit of legwork and modelling work in for themselves. And after Iron Horse Railways,
hello there, I didn't see you. I'm Craig from Iron Horse Railways,
took on this project himself, and I saw actually some great results from him, I thought I'm going to give this a go. They were born out of necessity, where BR found that a Class 08 shunter just didn't have the grunt to be able to get all the wagons up over the hump for sorting into the marshalling yard. They couldn't use a longer wheelbase locomotive because these would ground out on the top of the hump and would end up beached there and cause themselves a lot of damage. So they had to look to an idea that had found favour in the US and is what's often referred to as the master and slave or the cow and calf switcher. And this is where you've got effectively 2 locomotives semi-permanently coupled together that are both controlled from a single cab, and that's precisely what BR sought to do. Doncaster Works turned out 3 of these, built from 6 08 diesel shunters, with one of the shunters becoming the master, where the entire unit would be controlled from, and the other having its cab removed and becoming the slave unit. Both units were then given some really quite beefy buffer beams that brought the adhesive weight up to help with grip, and the master and slave Class 13 was born. There are a number of kits that I've seen on the market that give you the means to be able to produce these, and more recently with the advent of 3D printing, that is something that has really opened this up to the masses. So I thought I'd dip my toe in the water, and I went for an NIU Models 3D printed kit that allows you to take either 2 Bachmann Class 08s or 2 Hornby Super Detail 08s, and with a little bit of legwork turn them into your very own Class 13 shunter. So today, that is exactly what I'm going to be taking you through. Just how easy is it to build yourself your very own Class 13 hump shunter? And is it worth all the effort? Well, come with me and I'll show you exactly how I got on. Today's video comes in association with Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders and accessories that are designed by enthusiasts for enthusiasts. Find the full range available to order now at tramfabriek.co.uk. Additional support comes from...
This is Clark Railworks, and this is what we do. You'll know us from Ellis Clark Trains, and you'll get the same friendly expertise with us too. We've got a huge range of pre-owned model railways from all your favourite manufacturers, and maybe some you hadn't heard of before. It's the place to come for quality. We don't stock substandard models, and everything we sell is fully tested and photographed by model railway experts. No matter whether you model 00 gauge, N, HO or more, we have sought after models from all around the world with new listings added every weekday. Check out what's available now at clarkrailworks.com and don't miss out on your latest loco.
Now, I know over the years a lot of people have asked me about building kits of locomotives, and I've always said it's not something that really I find interesting. So you might be wondering why I took on a Class 13 build. And I'm not entirely sure. This isn't exactly a kit build. Let's face it, you start with 2 donor models, and over time I was able to pick up a couple of fairly cheap Hornby Super Detail 08s. In fact, one of them was really cheap simply because it didn't work properly and it had some damage on it. But that made it the perfect candidate for this, because it doesn't matter if the livery or even the cab is damaged when you build the slave unit on this. And I'd say that at shows and second hand, they're the models to look out for because you'll get them at a really favourable price. Now, I spent a weekend building this Class 13, and I must admit it's opened my eyes up a little bit more perhaps to taking on a little bit more of these kind of projects. I was a little bit out of my comfort zone, but I did find it very rewarding in the end, and if a novice like me can do this, then you can too. But first of all, I'd like to ask a big favour. Do please hit that like button, share this video and subscribe to the channel to be the first to know about new videos as and when they go up. And you can also head on over to Patreon and help support the channel to keep making the videos that you want to see. And also, if you're interested in getting hold of the same parts that I use to be able to make your own Class 13 project, we've also put a link to NIU models in the description box down below. It's not an affiliate link. I did a blind purchase of these, so it's really just a case of showing you exactly where I got the parts, and actually these worked really, really well for me. But let's get on and see just how well I did, and I'll guide you through the entire build process. Class 13 is a locomotive that I've really wanted for a long time. I've actually been secretly hoping that a manufacturer might bring one out, and in all honesty that's just never going to happen. They were very niche, only ever working at Tinsley, working over the hump there, and the reason that they were created was because of the unique circumstances of that yard and the traffic flows. They needed a locomotive to shunt things over the hump, but a single 08 just wasn't mighty enough to be able to do it. And a single locomotive such as like a Class 25 or a Class 20 quite honestly would have ground it out on the top of the hump. So they had to look elsewhere for the solution, and they chose to semi-permanently couple a pair of 08s together and have them so that both units were controlled from one cab. Kind of like multiple working, but they also removed the cab from the slave unit. Now initially they were coupled together cab to cab, and that just basically gave them poor visibility in both directions. So later on the master unit was reversed, and they ran in that form through into the early 1980s. There were only ever 3 of them, initially numbered in the D4500, D4501 and D4502 series, and carrying BR green. I believe they had wasp stripes from the outset, and then later on they got rail blue and became 13001 to 13003, and it was 13002 that was withdrawn in 1981, and the other 2 went with the closure of Tinsley Yard in 1985, and all of them were scrapped. Now, in order to produce one in 00, we're going to have to go into the realms of a little bit of kit work, and for this I obviously need 2 08s, and they really needed to be either both Hornby Super Detail or both Bachmann. And as luck would have it, I've been able to acquire a pair of Hornby Super Detail 08s. And before people start getting worried, this is actually a duplicate, so I already have one of these, which was very kindly sent into the channel. So this is not a unique locomotive to my fleet, and I'm not too bothered therefore about turning this into the master part of the Class 13. This one came to me as being damaged, and it's missing quite a few detail parts, namely the front steps, and it's been beaten up a bit. Now the motor does run, but it's a bit weak. It feels like it's been overstressed and on its way to burning out. But that's okay, because what I actually want to do is to turn this into a slave unit, and I'm going to be removing the motor and the gearing so that the entire Class 13 is only powered from the master unit. Now the reasons for this are that I want to fit a HM7000 decoder in here to have it Bluetooth controlled, and you just really struggle to be able to run them in multiple, and running both locomotives from a single decoder, whilst I'm told is possible, it's going to compromise the back EMF and possibly make it a little bit skittish when running, especially when this Class 08 doesn't run anywhere near as strongly as this one. So to avoid it looking like this is being pushed along down the track, I'm just going to remove all that and let it freewheel. Now the rods are actually in okay condition. There's a little bit of damage on there, but it's not broken, so that's fine. The cranks are all where they should be. Now this really bright orange, I think it's Harry Needle Railroad Company livery. Not quite sure, but this is going to get fully repainted, whereas this is going to remain in the rail blue. I just need to paint the cab roof so that that's all blue. I have been studying photographs, and the class 13 I've actually chosen to do is 13002, and the reason for this is that the slave unit's cab end didn't have wasp stripes, and that makes things a lot easier. And I'm going to try and retain this front end by using a product called Mascol. I'm going to see if I can actually mask off these wasp stripes and therefore keep and preserve them, and they will be retained for the class 13. And with the slave cab unit, I'm not going to need to put wasp stripes on there, which was always going to be a tricky thing. Now I've managed to source parts for this conversion from a company called I think it's NIU or NIU Models. And first of all, this is the main part. This is the class 13 part. So we've got the cab for the slave unit, and then the class 13 also had bigger, heavier buffer beams, and this was part of the ballasting to give them more tractive force, give them better grip, and this includes a full set of those as well. And that's really all you need. But because my slave unit is missing steps, NIU or NIU Models also do replacement class 08 steps, so I've availed myself of a set of these because that's going to give me both front steps on there. And actually the 08 for the master unit is missing a rear step, so it's going to be really useful for that as well. To start off with, the master unit is pretty much going to be left alone, apart from putting on those buffer beams. Loads of space inside. This is going to be where the HM7000 decoder will go. I'm also going to be putting in a small speaker in here, but then I'm going to run some wires across, and the plan is to make use of the pickups on the slave unit. So I'll need 2 wires going across for that. And I'm also going to put another speaker in here. Now I have checked with Hornby, and the HM7000 decoder will run 2 speakers as long as they are wired in series. So there'll be a second set of wires going across. I'm going to fit quite a large speaker enclosure into here. With the motor gone, there's going to be plenty of room, and there may even be a case to run another set of 2 wires, so wires 5 and 6 across, and that will give me the stay alive in the front unit here. And of course there will be plenty of room for that because the motor will be gone. Now getting inside this unit is quite easy. The screws are already out, so I'm going to start by taking it apart. The motor itself and the cradle, that's all going to come out. And in terms of getting the cab off, that's really easy. Just move that apart, and the cab itself just slides off in its entirety. And I'm going to keep hold of that because that could well be a useful spare at some point in the future. And then I think we also need to remove the back head from the cab. This appears to be glued in, very tiny amount of glue. So we're going to get rid of that, and that basically gives us what we need. Remove the motor and its cradle, and this is just held in by a few screws. And essentially one of the things that I think we can do as well is just remove all of this wiring. We don't need it. It's just going to provide confusion. So that's coming out, and essentially these 2 wires coming up here are the wires for the pickups that we need. I'm just going to snip those off. I'll give myself as long a length as possible, and obviously just keep this. It does kind of work. I might service it and put it into the spares box, and that now means that all we need to do is remove the worm out of here. So I'm just looking how this comes apart. Essentially, I'm going to dismantle this enough to get the gearing out, but I am then going to put this back in because it gives us some adhesive weight. Just unclip from that side as well. And there's a worm gear in there. We just lift that out, and now the 08 is completely freewheeling. I'm going to just leave everything else in there. I don't see any need to delve in and try and take out all of those parts. Put that back over there just to stop anything from being able to get caught up in that gearing. Let's get this back into place. That gives us the weight. In fact, actually, there's a decent amount of weight in there, and you can see now we've got plenty of space to be able to put in a probably the largest enclosure in there, plus a stay alive, and that's going to be absolutely brilliant. And then I'm going to work out what I'm going to do with the wires. We're going to need a little bit of a loom going across, but that's absolutely fine. The instructions now say that we need to remove the buffers and the drawbar and sand all the detail flat on these buffer beams, front and back. We're saving the buffers because these are going to go into the new buffer beams, and these just, you can kind of wiggle them free and pull them out. Make sure you don't damage them. And let's just see if we can get that drawbar out okay. Again, I think it's just push fit. Yeah, there we go. Same with that at this end. Just push fit, and then I'm just going to get to work now sanding all of this buffer beam detail absolutely flat, ready for the new buffer beams. I've done a test fit just to check alignment, and they do fit actually really quite nicely, and the buffers holes do line up really well. I've also removed the slave cab from the sprue that it was 3D printed on, just giving it a little bit of a clean up with the file, and a test fit on this with the old cab floor removed. I had to take that out, and that actually does seem to fit really quite nicely into there. So that's going together really well. The next job though is I need to remove the locating pieces off the back of this. I'm going to use a sharp modelling saw, very carefully just sawing down into this and slowly working my way down and just getting rid of that big lip. If there's any burrs, I can just file them off once I'm done. It's actually quite an easy process just to cut that off, and I've gone over with the file just to make sure all that's smooth, and then just test align the cab, and that's going in there quite nicely, and already we've got the outline of the Class 13 coming together. So I want to be able to make sure that the body can still come off, and it's just a lot easier for painting if these are separate. So I'm going to look to glue those together, but not to the chassis. On the chassis itself, I need to do the buffer beams. These do match up reasonably well. Now they have a slightly elongated top on one end and a much flatter top on the other. So I just need to make sure that I get these the right way round. I do get instructions with this. So the narrow plate is on the front buffer beam, so that will be the radiator end of the locomotive, and then the other one will be to the other. So I'm just going to get those offered up, and at the same time I also want to make sure that I can add in those ladders as well that are missing. They're all going to be going onto the chassis part of the locomotive as well. With a little bit of gluing work, I've got the buffer beams on. These glue on actually really quite well, and I've also repaired the front steps with the set of spare steps that I got also from Nayu Models. And the cab has gone on really well. With the back sawn off, filed down, it's a nice smooth fit. Everything fits just as it should, and you can immediately see that the slave unit is coming together. So the next step is going to be to separate these out again. At the moment they're just loose fitted, and that should slide off. And I'm going to start the masking work on this. I want to keep the wasp stripes and the front radiator grille. I don't want to have to repaint all of that. It provides an easily peel off layer of masking, which should then mean that we protect those wasp stripes. I'm going to put that to one side to dry. It needs 15 to 20 minutes before I actually start doing any of the painting. So I'm going to leave that be and turn my attention back to the chassis of the slave unit. Now I need to fit the drawbar hooks before I do some painting, but I also want to get the speaker enclosure in, and I'm going to be using the largest of the speaker enclosures. And this looks as though this is going to be a perfect fit over here at the front. And because quite a few models have integrated speakers, it means that when I've been doing the installation of HM7000 decoders, I've ended up with a few spare speakers. So this is the perfect opportunity to make use of one of these in the slave unit of this locomotive. So I'm just going to get this set up and onto the enclosure, and then I can get on with the actual fitting of this into the model. So that goes down and into there. Make sure that's in nice and tight, and then my plan is to put that in there this way round, and that should allow me enough extra cable that I can find a way to get this cable through and into the master unit. So I've got some double-sided 3M tape. I'm just going to cut a piece off. Let's put this onto the chassis. Straight down the middle, peel that off. And then this speaker will fit neatly onto here. Now I'm going to put the Stay Alive, the power pack, into probably the cab of the master unit. I did consider putting it into the slave unit, but actually I don't want too much going on, too many wires heading across, so I'm quite happy to leave that be. I'm going to add back in the coupling hooks, which we saved from the old buffer beams, and just gently work those in. I suspect might need to do a little bit of filing. That is very, very tight. So I'm going to get to work with a little file and just open that out. I've got the coupling hooks into place, just a little dab of super glue, and I'm going to go on now and start painting up these steps. This is Humbrol number 33, and very quickly this starts to transform this bit of the build. I've not put the buffers in because when I've been looking at the photographs of 13002, it appears to have black buffer beams with red buffers, whereas 13001 and 13003 both appear to have the yellow buffer beams. So I decided that this works out just fine for me. And then I'm also going to paint out this orange stripe along the side as well. This doesn't need to be there for the Class 13. It's a legacy of that orange livery that the donor locomotive had. Left it a few minutes and that paint is drying really quite nicely. I have though taken the opportunity just to cut a little notch in the buffer beam, and this is going to be for feeding the wires through. I've also just cut a notch underneath here very carefully with a Dremel just to provide the space. And what I want to do now is I've got the two wires from the pickups and I'm going to extend these, and I've got some spare fairly thin wire, red and black here, and I'm going to solder these on, put some heat shrink, and then that will allow me plenty to get across into the master unit. At the moment I'm just going to solder the entire thing on, and then I can trim it at a later date. It was a little bit harder than anticipated, and what I've done is I've swapped over the wires to the pickups to go out from underneath. I just soldered them to the phosphor bronze strips that play onto the backs of the wheels, and I've drilled a couple of holes, fed the wires out, just jammed them underneath the end of the keeper plate just to stop it from being able to stress this, and that's going to go out through the gap in the buffer beam, whilst the speaker cable is going out through the notch that I cut, and it's just all firmed into place. And just doing a little bit of Dremel work just to make sure that there's space, but hopefully that all will go together. And what it tells me is actually trying to get the stay alive into the locomotive here would be really difficult, so it's best to keep that into the master unit. The paint is pretty much dried on these, and I'm going to now go and get some paint onto the slave unit. Now I've got some rail match paint. It's actually quite an old one from back in the day, so I'm hoping it contains the good stuff, and I'll get a good colour from this. It might be just a little bit on the bright side. It is quite glossy from what I remember when it dries, but we'll fix that with a bit of weathering just to tone it down. But I've given that a little while to dry. 3 coats are on there. It does look very shiny. I think that this is like a super gloss finish, and I will tone it down with weathering. But I'm going to try and get the mascol off now, which with hindsight probably didn't need so much. Because I didn't end up spraying the white undercoat stuff on. But actually it's a bit like, do you remember as a child painting PVA glue onto your fingers and then peeling it off when it dried? It's got that kind of vibe to it, quite therapeutic actually. I was a bit worried that this wasn't going to quite work and was going to stay put. I mean, there's still plenty of time for that to happen. But it is coming off clean, and actually it does seem to be pulling any micro bits of dirt off with it that were stuck in the detail on the front. I can see the radiator coming off. Oh, if I knew the radiator came off, I would have taken it off. We've got the wires all coming out. Final check. I'm happy with that. So I'm going to look to start fitting the body. Gently move that down and in. Yeah, felt it go there. And just make sure that's out of the way. That detail back where it should be. I'm going to start underneath at the front. Now these are going into the 3D printed back here, into the slave cab, so I don't want to stress these too much. And what I want to do now is look to making a start on the master unit. Now I'm just going to very carefully slide the body off. There's not as much to do on this, and you can see here this has already been fitted with the HM7000 decoder. We've got the small speaker down at the front, and the power bank is inside the cab, which it does fit really quite nicely down near the floor, so you can't really see it through the windows. And all I really need to do inside here is graft the wires in for the speaker in the slave unit, and we also need to put the extended buffer beams on. Again, it's just a duplication of what I did for the slave unit. Just a good wiggle was enough on the slave unit to get these to come free, and I just don't want to break them. We also need to take the coupling drawbar out as well, which all of these do get reused. Turn it round, just a wiggle, and we're free. Wiggle, and we're free. Just take it gently with these, and again, drawbar hook, just pull that out, and then I'm ready to sand down these fronts. So I'm going to first of all start filing the details off. This is where you kind of committed. I'm just going to work on this, work it down with my file. That's not rust, by the way, that's weathering powders. It got spilt on there, just in case anybody's thinking I'm a mucky puppy with rusty tools. It's not rust, it's weathering powders. And we've got the other buffer beams from the kit. So I'm going to go ahead, separate these off from the sprues, and then just line them up and glue them in place. And just a quick reminder to ourselves, it's the cab end that has a slightly wider top. So let's just check on that. And yeah, I can feel that's going in nicely. So it's just a job for the super glue. Just let's get this nicely covered. That should grab fairly quickly, which it has. A little bit of super glue, and then let's just get that right where it needs to be, and there. That's gone on nicely. Now this also is missing one of these steps. Now I had those in the kit. It's on that side, but it's just missing on this side. So I'm going to very carefully add that back in, as we have one available to us. I've got the coupling hooks in place, super glued them in, they've gone in quite readily, and I'm just going to get a coat of the matte 33 paint in place next. And this is quite easy, it does dry very, very quickly. And now comes the probably quite tricky bit, which is going to be connecting up the wiring for the two parts of this. Now I'm going to use some Roco style couplings between the two of these, and that's going to allow some quite close coupling. So I'm just going to couple them together, and I don't have to worry about the wire for the pickups, because that's going to be all done underneath. I've also put the buffers back in. That was actually much more straightforward on the master unit than the slave. The older Hornby locomotive is slightly different. There's a few differences, one of which the buffers are round rather than slightly squared where they push in, so they were actually a perfect fit. Now what I'm going to do is first of all remove the plug from the speaker in the slave unit, and let's just pare these wires down. What we need to do is actually put the speakers in series, so I'm going to just think I'll break in about here, and I'm going to do the black, cut the black wire and leave the red one intact, and this will allow me to put this speaker in the slave unit in series. So these are quite tightly coiled, so I'm just try and give myself a bit of slack on this. Let's see about getting these wires bared and tinned. That's perfect, and I'm going to need some heat shrink as well. So there's two pieces. Make sure all is well. Right, let's get some flux going on here. Soldering, as I've often said, is quite easy if you've got the right tools. So first of all, let's just drop a little bit of heat shrink down onto both of these, just so that it's on the wires. And then I need a little brush, which I've got here, and just going to put a little bit of flux on each of these bare wires. I'm going to give myself a little bit of slack, which will ultimately end up inside the locomotive, just to make sure that I don't have any problems in the future. Let's get a little bit of there, and a little bit on there, and a little bit onto there, and finally just a little bit up onto there. Now this is going to be a little bit tricky because we've got to do this without actually melting any of the locomotive bodywork. So again, a little bit of flux, a little bit of flux, and let's get these connected. Roll up the heat shrink, and let's get that just shrunk down. Next piece, there, add on there. Heat shrink and get that shrunk down and gripping, just to protect from any random shorts. With these wires now attached, it's time for a bit fiddly stuff next. I'm just going to move those wires out of the way. I've got it wrapped around the coupling just to keep it at bay, and I've also gone ahead and just cut a little notch at the base of the front here. And what I want to do now is to start to work out how to secure all of this in place. I'm going to use a little bit of Captain tape down and round. Move these over to roughly the centre, and let's start to work the body back on. And as that goes down, just need to make sure that yeah, that's fine. There's just a little piece of wire at the side that we have to make sure isn't getting jammed. So this is where it gets really, really tricky, because we're now getting some buffer lock there. I'm going to just tighten down the body on the master unit and then just have an assessment of where we got to. I'm quite pleased actually, it's gone together really well. I have off camera soldered up the pickups, and now it's over to the main layout for a test run just to make sure that all is well. On the tracks, it's quite clear that the model really does perform reasonably well. I'm going to set it off to just have a trundle around the main line on wear yard to bed in. At the moment, the slave unit, whilst there's no motor in there, the gearing does seem to be dragging a little bit, and I noticed that this is causing the master unit to slip just a little bit in places, but hopefully that'll go away. If needs be, I can always remove some more of those gears and just make sure that it's got a little bit less rolling resistance. Now that the model has successfully completed that test run, what I want to do is start work on some of the touch-ups with the paintwork that needs doing still. I'm going to apply some matte coat to this just to tone it down before the weathering, but I do need to change the colour on the roof here. I'm also going to need to remove the Liverpool Street Station pilot branding just here on one of the exhauster boxes, and ultimately as well the 08528 tops number will be going, and I'm going to be ordering up some transfers so that I can have 13002. Whether I replace the tops data panel, I'm not 100% sure. You're really only going to be able to see that that's for an 08 and not a 13 when you get really, really close, so I'll make that decision closer to the time. But really now it's just a case of some of the touch-ups on the paintwork before we consider the weathering that I'm going to be undertaking. So the Humbrol 96 goes slightly too light, but it does dry matte, and I'm going to weather over the top. Ideally we'd repaint both units in the same shade so that they matched, but to be honest I prefer to keep the factory markings on 08528 and just replace the running number. Now I have been asked about doing the transfers. This is an area I think a lot of people get scared about. So I'm going to try and film this. It's a little bit tricky because probably my hand is going to get in the way a lot, but I'm going to try and do my best. Now the first thing is you're going to need a fiberglass pencil. So this is one that I got from DCC Concepts. I set the end quite small, and I'm going to very carefully take off the old number. Now, none of these digits are reusable for the number 13002. So I'm going to get in here, and you're probably not going to see a huge amount. Let me just move my plate. I've got water and a little bit of IPA, isopropyl alcohol in there, just to break up the surface tension. Just move that out of the way and see if I can show you how to remove the old numbering. Now I'm going to keep the TOPS data panel. To be honest, you're not going to be able to read it unless you're under very close magnification, and I'm just not fussed enough to be changing that over. You don't want to scrub away manically. Take it nice and slow. Just focus on the letters, sorry, the numbers, and you can see they slowly start to disappear. But we're not wanting to go so gung-ho that we leave a groove in the side of the model. Now, a lot of this is going to get covered up by the new numbers, so it's not going to be too much of an issue. Any of this dulling of the blue paint is sort of going to be hidden by the new numbers. Now this will help not just with removing the numbers. It doesn't want to go, but I can just rotate that out of the way, and that works out better. And then I can get in and get the last of that final number. And from time to time, what you can do as well, just use a soft paintbrush and just clean any of the stuff that's come off away, and you can see actually that's not too bad. A little bit more in places, and I'm quite happy with that, and that's fine. I'm going to leave the handle just to one side for now, and I'm going to be using some really ancient Methfix transfers. Now you can buy the class 13 numbers ready-made, which is probably going to be a lot simpler for a lot of people. I've had these for probably 30 years plus, and you just cut out the individual numbers and then set them in one at a time, and you can actually use the dulled out area that we've got there where the original 08 number was to be able to line these up. And you put them in the water with a little tiny bit of IPA mix face down, and just let that soak for a little bit. And then what I'm going to be doing is lining that up on the model, and then I've also got a very small flathead screwdriver along with my tweezers. I'm going to manipulate it, and then right when we're happy we just press them on and carefully remove the backing. Now these are printed on back to front so that the paper backing is behind the number, and when you press it down you then end up with the number the correct way round. I'm going to hold that very carefully and there it goes. And if we're not quite happy with the placing, there should be just a little bit of movement on this. So just going to move it across just a little tiny bit, and there's the end result. I've got the handrail back in place. Don't worry if some of the numbers are just slightly out of line. That was actually fairly typical on some locomotives because the originals were applied as individual numbers from a kind of vinyl backed number and were just stuck on, so there could be a little bit of variance even then. I've also gone ahead and I've put some other transfers that I had onto the slave unit, overhead warning flashes, and actually because I found a number of different pictures of 13002 with the British Rail lake crest on, albeit in green, I thought I'd pay homage to that and put some onto the slave unit. These are going to be quite well weathered down. If they don't look right, I can remove them. But the beauty of 13002 is that there's not a lot of work needed on the slave unit in terms of putting, even the BR double arrow didn't appear on the slave unit of 13002. So there we have it, pretty much our finished model ready for weathering. Once I was happy with all of the transfer placing, it's just time for a quick finish off of some of the finer details, and this is mostly matte number 34 from the Humbrol enamel range to pick out the handrails. These have obviously been painted out as part of the painting process, so I paint them back in very carefully with a small brush with this matte white paint. Once all this is dried, the Humbrol black dirt wash goes over everything, and this is a great leveler when it comes to paintwork. We've got that difference between the master and the slave, and this starts to tone that out. Just slosh it on, make sure you get the wasp stripes and all of the detail, and then whilst it's still wet, I cleaned up things like the glass so that you'd have a clean view for the driver in the cab, and also the cab handrails and the door and the step underneath. I just made sure that these weren't too filthy, because on the real locomotive these would get cleaned to some degree by the passage of people. Once this black wash had started to dry, I then worked it with some cotton buds, and this is the process that transforms something that just looks splashed on to something that really does look weather worn. What you're trying to do is wipe off a lot of the deposits from this wash, and do it in the same way that rain and gravity would affect it on the real locomotive. What you'll find is that the panels start to clean up a little bit but still look a bit grimy, and the dirt really accumulates in the details such as the louvres and the hinges, which is exactly what you want. I then moved on to weathering powders. Again, these are from the Humbrol range, and there's two that I used. I used dark rust for some of the older looking deposits, and just try and find yourself a place where rust would tend to start out. These tend to be around the panel joins, and you just have a little spot with a tiny brush, and then you start to elongate it down. Imagine how rainwater would move the rusty water and discolour in a line down from it. Less is more. Try and concentrate only on the panels where you could imagine rust creeping in, and don't overdo it. This isn't a scrap locomotive, it is a workaday workhorse. I did most of this with the dark rust, and then I moved over to the light rust, and places where you could imagine foot traffic perhaps cleaning off the metal and then fresh rain starting it to rust again, like on the steps, I put a little bit of the fresh rust. Also on the slave unit, I did a little bit of this in the cab checker plate area. You could imagine shunters standing there a lot, and that would renew the rust and not allow it to darken down over time. With this done, it was the final finishing features. I wanted a little bit of oily stains. It's something that I noticed with a lot of the photographs of the real locomotives, that they looked in places like they'd been painted with a mix of used motor oil and coal dust. So I used Humbrol number 21, which is a gloss black, and very carefully stippled small amounts around the base of the fuel tanks and on the running plate, and just kind of moved that along the bottom of the panels where you could imagine oil seeping out from the engine compartment, and then just moved it around with a little bit of brush cleaning fluid so it didn't look like paint and looked more like a smudgy deposit. Around the exhausts on both the master and slave, I also added a small amount there too, again using the brush cleaning fluid just to smooth out the edges and tone it in, making it look like oily deposits from an engine exhaust rather than something that was painted on, and then just leave it to dry. And that is the final effect that we've got with our Class 13. Out on the track, it runs absolutely perfectly, and I'm really pleased with this project. Well, I hope you really enjoyed today's project video, and it's something that I've actually thoroughly enjoyed doing. I took about a day and a half's worth of work working on it. In terms of running, the model performs really well with that HM7000 decoder, the power bank, and the twin speakers in there as well. Now, if you're going to put in a twin speaker setup yourself in one of these, do pay close attention. The speakers have to be in series. Do not wire them up in parallel, otherwise you'll strain the amplifier circuits in the HM7000 decoder. With the slave unit freewheeling, it actually performs pretty reasonably well, chugging it around Weir Yard, and I can imagine hours of fun shunting with this in the sidings. The weathering too was something which is well outside my comfort zone, but I'm quite pleased with the results I've been able to achieve. It's some simple techniques, and if you follow these as well, you should be able to get on just fine. As I said at the beginning, we've got a link down below to NIU models where you can find the full setup that I used for these, and they've also got a few spare parts as well, such as the ladders for a Class 08, and my donor model for the slave unit was actually missing its front ladders, and so that was a product that was really useful to be able to get hold of to be able to make the model whole again. And that's probably quite a good tip for you if you pick up something like a Class 08 shunter that's missing some of the detail parts. There are some great aftermarket suppliers that can help you out. But I'd love to hear from you in the comments section. Have you tried one of these Class 13 builds? How did you find it? And were your experiences something that maybe you'd venture to do it again? Do share down in the comments your experiences of your own build. If there were some pitfalls perhaps that you fell into, share your experiences with your fellow modeler and help them out. It's always a really useful resource, and it's always great to hear from you all in the comments section down below. And what did you think of what I achieved? Were you impressed that a novice such as myself could put this 13 together? Well, do let me know. And until next time, do hit that like button, share this video, subscribe to the channel to be the first to know about new videos as and when they go up. You can also head on over to Patreon, we've got a link down below, and help support the channel to keep making the videos that you want to see. And we've got the full merch store as well, so get your very own Billy's Replacement t-shirt. Gronk it up, probably quite apt for a video like this, and many more besides. We've got t-shirts, we've got hoodies, we've got mugs, we've got stickers, we've got it all there, so do check it out. And until next time, this is me, Jenny Kirk, saying you take great care of yourself. Happy modelling, bye for now. Today's video comes in association with Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders and accessories that are designed by enthusiasts for enthusiasts. Find the full range available to order now at tramfabriek.co.uk. Additional support is provided by...
This is Clark Railworks, and this is what we do. You'll know us from Ellis Clark Trains, and you'll get the same friendly expertise with us too. We've got a huge range of pre-owned model railways from all your favourite manufacturers, and maybe some you hadn't heard of before. It's the place to come for quality. We don't stock substandard models, and everything we sell is fully tested and photographed by model railway experts. No matter whether you model 00 gauge, N, HO or more, we have sought after models from all around the world with new listings added every weekday. Check out what's available now at clarkrailworks.com and don't miss out on your latest logo.
I'd like to thank everybody over on Patreon, and an extra special huge thanks goes out to our Patreon heroes. Without you guys over on Patreon, we really wouldn't be able to keep making the video content that you see on this channel. And don't forget that you can also head on over to patreon.com/Jennifer Kirk and check out the different tiers of rewards. Thank you so much. You are absolute legends.